So let's get back to the things you're working on. My Fit Dog, you launched that in the spring of this year. I know that you had a prototype, you were doing a crowdfunding campaign. Let's start with what My Fit Dog is first.
This has been a long walk, and it's been fascinating because looking back on it, the necessity of the long walk is important. So really the idea really originated from, we were working with a team that was working with three-dimensional accelerometers and the technology of activity tracking, and we're applying it to children in China and trying to understand from a physical education perspective. And it really came upon just glancing an article on dogs and the pet market and seeing the unique opportunity within that to say, why don't we start doing this? Right. So the idea was formed. One of the most critical pieces was essentially my aha moment of the actual activity tracker itself. So the product in itself is it's a two-piece activity tracker. So one for the person, one for the dog. And it's used as having the dog for the altruistic motivation to help change the habits of the person. Originally, the product was just for the dog. And the aha moment really came in when, Cesar Millan talks about it all the time. And he says, my greatest moment as a dog trainer was when I realized it's not about just the dog, it's how do I become a human psychologist? How do I change the behaviors of the person? And he talks about it on the show all the time. He corrects the behavior of the person as much as he corrects it for the dog. Same concept, and this understanding is, at the end of the day, there's a direct correlation between overweight dogs and overweight people. And there's so many dogs, and the pet market is so large. But what's unique is how do you change habits? And this really comes to, we've poured about 2,500 hours into studying behavior psychology, persuasive technology, and obviously I can apply this now to all my various ventures and things that I do. But the understanding of how do we change human habits? How do we really tap into the basal ganglia, the habit portion of your brain to start saying, how do we change these habits? And what's unique about it is, one, certainly the altruistic motivation exists. People care about their dogs, people love their dogs, and very importantly, people are proud of their dogs.
Oh, well, but because it's that intrinsic, non-judgmental love in return.
They want to boast.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to boast to some extent, and having that piece, it's like when a child gets a state championship or something, they want to post that everywhere.
Right.
And the ability aspect, so the behavior change formula at the end of the day, and Dr. BJ Fogg has made this very famous, is motivation times ability times triggers. So the understanding of the ability element was so unique because you're really placing the dog and placing the person into our existing habit loop.
Okay.
So right now, if you think about it, people naturally will change their habits the minute they get a dog to take them outside. Otherwise, the negative consequences of them going in the house. Right there and then, you can add a behavior onto an existing behavior or existing habit to that extent. So let's say you take them out twice a day, add a walk on top of that, add a jog on top of that, and start changing those habits on a very, very small, gradual process, and then having the positive affirmations come back to you in that process. That's so much different than people trying to motivate you to go to the gym. Because the reality of it is, that's an entirely new behavior outside of your existing habits.
Right, but it also, it's almost like the buddy system, right? I mean, you have somebody who relies on you for everything, and so you are required. There's a requirement involved in there. I mean, sure, it's a choice, right? But when you're an individual going to the gym, it's also a choice. It's a lot easier when you have somebody calling you and saying, where are you? Get to the gym. I'm picking you up, or whatever it might be, and motivating each other.
Absolutely.
But it's still a choice.
Certainly. So then what we really do is, because the motivation and ability piece are somewhat built into the system already, or built into our natural habits, our point is how do we develop the right triggers, or the right cues, however people want to talk about it, and then it's stimulating both the external and then motivating people towards internal triggers. So an example to that from let's use Instagram as one of the most popular apps, but they actually designed very specifically with the notion of how do I design for external and internal triggers. So externally, they have their tags, they have your pop-up notifications, whatever it might be. That'll drive people to the app, but in order to develop the habits that really, in some cases, you call it addictive apps, or creating that piece. What's so critical to that is having the internal triggers and understanding what simulates the internal triggers. So that's kind of what they call the Tylenol or the vitamin. So the vitamins are good in a sense that they make you feel better. I'm going to do this to enhance something. So Instagram had the enhancement of photos. The internal side of things is I want to get tagged, I want to get liked, I want to post pictures. Almost the self-necessity of feeling needy or feeling desired, those are the very unique pieces. They call it the consistency and inconsistency of affirmations and positive reflections. Your desire for love and significance, contribution and growth. If you can capture those 6 elements in terms of your internal trigger base, then you've created an addictive application.
Interesting. And so, I mean, I know you're still working on all of this, but there's an app that comes with it, right?
Sure.
And you can share it with your friends, is that right?
Yeah.
And they can help motivate you and encourage you, or hey, good job, high five, or doing 5 miles away.
The really what part is building the social herding. So there's a lot of they've done a lot of psychological studies to say people will often say one thing but really do the other.
Right.
Part of what they are doing the other is we often say that we're self-motivated, but in reality we're very much followers, or
right.
we're tribal people. So to that extent is developing that tribe. And I think what the unique opportunity in social media nowadays, and I'm actually working on somewhat of a book at this point too, is the understanding of how much our social media affects our own personal behaviors. Jim Rohn talks about it all the time. He's like, the 5 closest people are, you're the average of your 5 closest people. My hypothesis nowadays, and actually more so in the future, is that 5th person is now going to be your social media profile, and who you follow, who influences you. Facebook had a tremendous study done that was highly controversial, but they took about 700,000 people within the network. Half of them they see more positive posts. They changed the newsfeed algorithm. The other half they did more negative posts. In that science, they could find that the more positive you saw, the more positive you posted. The more negative you saw, the more negative you posted. Ultimately, how does that affect human behavior? Well, people post pictures, people post sayings, whatever it might be. What we say, we ultimately become. So that will be a very unique piece. And now we're transitioning that to MyFit Dog. You have a huge network of dog owners. You have a huge network of people. Ultimately, can we change the daily habits of people, even by a little bit? The tremendous change in the world, and I hate to use the startup terminology of change the world, but let's just chip away a little bit of the human behavior to influence behavior so that we can do more positive.